Today we're going to be looking at the Domesday Survey, but before we start looking at that, I want you just to have a go at the starter, which is looking at what we talked about last lesson, okay, with the feudal system. So the feudal system solved two problems for William. Can you remember what those two problems were? But also potentially it created a problem for William or for any future king. So write on your whiteboards what you think the answers to those are, pause the video and then press play again once you think you've got the answers. So the two problems the feudal system solved, one is that it provided the king with the army he so desperately needed, and secondly, it is giving him a way to reward his Norman followers so they won't all leave him and go back home, okay, to where their families are. So it solved those two problems for William. The problem it potentially created for William or any future king, if you look very carefully at your diagram from last lesson, you'll notice that the army is actually controlled by the barons. They're loyal to the barons. They got their land from the barons, not from the king. So if the barons wanted to use their army against the king, then potentially they could do so. All right, so that's your first activity, looking back at the feudal system last lesson. Right, what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at something called the Domesday Book. This is a massive survey which was compiled, took several years, okay, to do, and we're going to look at why it was put together, what information does it contain, okay, and what can it tell us. So by 1086, William is pretty much in charge of England. Right? Most of the rebellions have now finished. It's relatively peaceful, and consequently, England becomes effectively more of a target now for people abroad. Right? So he's more worried now that England will be attacked from abroad, because now it's peaceful, now it's more prosperous, now it's got more money. It is a more desirable place for people to attack. He wants to bring soldiers over for protection, but he doesn't want to use the English soldiers, he wants to use his Norman soldiers. Remember, these are professional soldiers, so he felt they were going to be better trained. So if he wants to bring soldiers over from France, okay, to protect his kingdom, then he is going to need more money. You get your money from the people through taxes, so he needs to find out exactly how much the English earn and whether they could pay more taxes. He sends officials all around the country. These officials go around and they ask people all sorts of questions about how much land they've got, how many animals they've produced, what trade they've got, how many products, okay, they've bought, they've sold, okay, throughout the year. So it's lots and lots and lots of probing questions to try and find out how much money people potentially have got, and therefore could they pay more tax. The officials come round, and straight away the people will know these officials come from the king. They come from the king, and they know they come from the king because there's something that they are wearing. It's not to do with how grand the clothing is, it's all to do with the colour of what they're wearing. All right, so they're wearing the colour purple. This was a royal colour in this time period. If you wore the colour purple and you weren't working on the king's business, or you weren't from the royal family, then effectively you were impersonating a royal family, all right, and that could carry the death penalty. All right, so people knew not to wear the colour purple. So these officials would come round and they would be wearing purple robes, so people know they're on the king's business. Are people likely to lie to the king? Not a chance. All right, we've talked about what happened after the Harrying of the North. We've talked about what happened after the rebellion in the Fens, okay, in Ely. People had learned that if you cross William, the consequences, okay, were very, very serious. So it's very, very unlikely people are going to lie, okay, to the king, because they are scared of what he might do. They know that these people are coming from the king because, okay, of the colour that they are wearing. In case people did still lie to the king, they would send, or the king sent round, a second group of officials, all right, a month or so later, to ask exactly the same questions. There is absolutely no chance these people would have remembered what they said if they had lied, right? Simply not going to remember. They wouldn't have written it down because they didn't think these people are going to come back again. Even if they did think to write it down, they can't, because most people couldn't read and write in this time period. So if you lied and these people came around again, the chances of you giving the same answer a second time a few months later was slim, if non-existent. So they would find out if people had lied. William got just the right information. He found out exactly what he wanted to know, that people in this country were much richer than he had first realised. So now people had to pay more tax, and William could bring over the soldiers he wanted from Normandy. It becomes known as the Domesday Survey. Right, we need to talk about why it was known as Domesday Survey. Domesday in medieval history means Day of Judgment. The Day of Judgment was the day that you died, when a decision was made on whether you would go to heaven or hell, depending on what sins you have committed and how good a life you have led. Williams became known as the Domesday Survey because just like you can't escape the Day of Judgment, you can't escape the day you died, you can't escape Williams' survey. They came round every single place in England twice. But also, you are again being judged. This time, you're not being judged on your sins. Instead, you are being judged, on how much money you have got. Right, so you've got some questions now that I want you to answer. So I want you to write in full sentences. So the title will be Domesday Survey. Write out, the question in your answer. So rather than why did William want to carry out the survey, William carried out the survey because. Why did it become known as the Domesday Survey? It became known as the Domesday Survey because. All right, so include the question in your answer. Okay, right, I want you to have a go at answering those questions in your book. Okay, so pause the video. All right, and then when everyone is finished, when you've all finished, I want you to press the video again and I will go through the answers with you. So just to go through those answers, I want you to purple pen and add anything that you don't or haven't put in first time round. So why did William want to carry out the survey? You need to have included that he wanted to bring soldiers, He wants to bring soldiers from France and therefore he needed more money. He needed more taxes to pay for them, So 3 things that needs to go in there. He needs more protection, He feels that England's vulnerable to attack. He wants those soldiers to come from France because they are professional, and he needs money, he needs taxes to do that. Why did it become known as the Domesday Survey? Well, Domesday means judgment, In this time period, you're being judged, or in this context of the Domesday Survey, you're being judged, on how much money you've got, rather than in the medieval version, of being judged on what sins you've committed, because it was the day that you died. Nobody could escape the Day of Judgment. It happened on the day that you died, and nobody could escape William's survey. So again, 2 answers there. 1, you're being judged on how much money you've got rather than what sins you've committed. And secondly, nobody could escape, this survey. How accurate do you think the survey was? Right, for this one, we should be saying that yes, it is extremely accurate, People are unlikely to lie to the king. And you should be including in here how they know these people come from the king. So mention they're wearing the colour purple, and that was the king's colour. Secondly, you also need to mention why people wouldn't lie to the king. People were scared of the king. Talk about what he did in the Harrying of the North. Talk about the salt on the ground. Talk about people starving to death. Talk about the Fenland Rebellion. Talk about what he did to the people, who were guilty of that rebellion. And that people, didn't want that to happen to them, so they're not going to upset William. They're not going to lie to him. The third answer in that question as well is, again, the fact that they sent a second group of officials round for a second time. So if you had lied, you would have been found out. Just to bring into that question, if people did lie to William and he found out, do you think he's going to kill them? The answer there is no. It's not going to kill. It might make an example of 1 or 2, but there's absolutely no point killing half of your population, because then nobody can pay tax. So what the king would do instead is he would maybe make an example of 1 or 2, but then he would make it a financial, a money punishment. So basically, it might be that you are fined a huge amount of money for telling lies. It could be that you have got the extra goods that you said you hadn't got, they'd be taken off you. You may be charged at a high level of tax anyway. The whole point is that William was trying to get more money, therefore the punishments are also going to be about him getting more money. Last question, do you think the Domesday Survey would have been popular? Again, 2 answers. One person in particular will have loved this survey, and I want you to explain why. One person in particular would have thought this survey was amazing. Most people, however, will not have liked this survey. Why will they not have liked this survey? Well, quite simply, they've got to pay more tax. Nobody particularly wants to pay more tax. Right, spend a bit of time purple penning those answers, making sure you've got as much detail now as you can. Once you have done that, moving on to the last slide, I want you to have a look at this particular graph. So it's showing how the land was shared out in 1086. So you've got the percentage of the people who owned the land. You've got it put into a pie chart. You've got the key next to it. I want you to think about, and you can either draw this or you can just write about it. What would that graph look like in 1066? So 20 years earlier, Let's even say, what would it have looked like in March 1066? So draw an example of what that chart would have looked like 20 years earlier, and then try and have a go at the question of what does this tell us about England in 1086? What has happened? What has changed? We know what the change is because we've been studying it, but can you interpret that graph to explain that change for me? Okay, all right, get that work done, please, and that's your work for today.